While Democrats are at least attempting to move ahead on impeachment, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is throwing cold water on that move. Let's go to NBC's Sahil Kapoor, who's joining me now. I have a feeling you're going to pick up where Josh left off, Sahil. What are lawmakers saying about all this?
Alex, there's anger, there's fury, there's dismay, and most notably among Democrats, there's determination to do something about President Trump. They don't want to be the opposition party that sits back and doesn't act on something as grave as this. Now, the top two Democrats in Congress, Nancy Pelosi in the House and Chuck Schumer in the Senate, have said that the president should resign, the cabinet should remove him. As Josh pointed out, that is looking highly unlikely, and the only option they have here, if that doesn't happen, is impeachment. They're already circulating among Democrats articles of impeachment. One single article called Incitement of Insurrection that accuses the president of willfully inciting violence against the government of the United States, a charge every bit as serious as it sounds. That is an article of impeachment that Democrats appear likely to take up as early as next week if there's no intervening action between then. Let's take a listen to what Speaker Pelosi said on 60 Minutes, capturing how she feels about this.
Hello, guys. Your friend and host, Dr. John here. Over 120 lawmakers, including 7 senators, have publicly called for Trump to resign, but he refused, daring Congress to impeach him instead. Articles of impeachment are advancing, creating a constitutional standoff that could reshape the presidency and the republic itself. Let me paint the picture for you so you understand exactly what's happening right now. You've got Congress, which is usually split and dysfunctional most of the time, suddenly united on one thing. That thing is that Trump needs to go. And they're not just whispering about it in back rooms where nobody can hear. They're doing it publicly, they're doing it on camera, they're doing it in official statements. They think you need to know this. Over 120 House members.
Sadly, the person who's running the executive branch is a deranged, unhinged, dangerous president of the United States. And only a number of days until we can be protected from him. But he has done something so serious that there should be prosecution against him.
Well, I gather that the 25th Amendment is off the table.
No, it isn't. Nothing is off the table.
Now, the Speaker has even inquired about the president's access to the nuclear codes to give you a sense of where her mind is at the moment. The biggest problem for Democrats at this point is the calendar. President Trump has only 11 days in office left, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the top Republican, has not explicitly taken a position on the issue of impeachment and conviction, but he is quietly throwing cold water on the idea by circulating a memo pointing out that without unanimous consent, which is how the Senate does pretty much anything quickly, it is not going to be able to receive any articles of impeachment on January 19th. That is one day before President-elect Biden takes office. That puts Democrats in a position of deciding, do they want to spend some of the early days?
And 7 senators walked out and basically said, you know what, Trump? We're giving you an out here. We're giving you a choice. You can resign quietly. You can say it's for your family, for your health, for personal reasons, whatever you want to tell the press and the American people. Walk away with some dignity still there. Step aside and live to fight another day. Or, and I mean or, we're going to impeach you for real this time. We're going to have a full Senate trial. We're going to drag your name through the mud. We're going to have testimony. We're going to have evidence. We're going to make this the biggest removal process this country has seen since Andrew Johnson, who got impeached way back in 1868. Take your pick. And Trump's response to this offer?
In the wake of yesterday's unprecedented violence, we've seen a string of resignations from the Trump administration overnight. And this morning, the president himself is facing mounting calls to resign or be removed from office. NBC's Kristen Welker's at the White House for us. Hey, Kristen, good morning.
Hi, Hoda. Good morning to you. This is a White House in chaos with, as you say, multiple officials resigning overnight. And now lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are rebuking President Trump for encouraging violence. NBC News has confirmed this morning there is even talk of invoking the 25th Amendment here within the administration to remove President Trump from office with fear there could be more unrest. In the wake of violence by his supporters, nearly 100 lawmakers in Congress this morning are calling for President Trump's removal from office.
That's where we are right now. And he's incited this. This was a coup. You cannot sugarcoat this. You cannot be nice about it.
The incoming Senate Majority Leader squarely blaming Mr. Trump for the uprising.
This mob was in good part President Trump's doing, incited by his words, his lies.
Come on. You think Trump is going to take a deal like that? Trump doesn't resign from anything. Trump doesn't admit defeat. Trump doesn't slink away quietly into the sunset. Trump fights. Trump doubles down. Trump insists that he did nothing wrong and that everyone else is crazy and that the whole thing is a setup. So he looked at Congress and said, no, absolutely not. Not happening. I'm the president. I was elected fair and square in a legitimate election. I won. Everyone is trying to get me because they're jealous and afraid of my power and my popularity.
This violence, in good part, his responsibility, his everlasting shame.
One top State Department official tweeting, "These actions threaten our democracy and our republic. Trump is entirely unfit to remain in office and needs to go." Multiple sources familiar with the matter tell NBC News there have been informal discussions about invoking the 25th Amendment by some staff-level officials within the administration. The 25th Amendment says if a president becomes unable to do the job, he can be forcibly removed and the vice president takes over. One way to do that, the vice president would need to agree, as well as a majority of the cabinet members. It's not clear these discussions have reached the cabinet level, and two sources say the idea has not been discussed directly with Vice President Pence. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton warned against invoking the 25th Amendment on CNN, saying it could make matters worse.
We ought to bear in mind the adage, do no harm, because you can make this worse if we're not careful.
Meanwhile, multiple Trump officials resigning overnight.
I've done incredible things. The country is stronger than ever, and I'm not going anywhere. That's the Trump move. That's his playbook. That's the pattern we've seen over and over. And now, Congress has to decide whether they're serious about impeachment or whether this was just theater and political posturing that won't amount to anything. Here's why this matters right now. And here's why people are losing their minds about it all over social media and news networks. This isn't like the other impeachments where both sides were kind of expecting it, or where the party in power could shrug and say, whatever, we'll block this in the Senate anyway.
Including one of the president's longest-serving aides, Stephanie Grisham. She served as White House press secretary and was most recently the First Lady's chief of staff, also calling it quits the White House social secretary and a deputy press secretary. Multiple sources familiar with the matter tell NBC News there could be more resignations coming, including National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. Sources say Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao is considering her options. Now, there are also reports overnight that a top National Security Council official has resigned. We reached out to the NSC, but so far, no response. And I just want to set the scene here at the White House as it unfolded. Hoda, as this was all coming to pass, a number of officials just had these stunned and frankly stricken looks on their faces. And at this hour, many of them tell me they are still in the dark about what the president will do next. Hoda.
And on top of that, his Twitter account has been frozen, I guess. Any idea when that is going to be reactivated, Kristen?
His Twitter account was frozen for about 12 hours, but pending him taking down some of the false information that he had put up yesterday, including reiterating those false claims of widespread voter fraud. And Hoda, it's not just Twitter, it's also Facebook and Instagram.
This time, the pressure is different. The mood is different. The energy is different. You've got bipartisan calls for removal. You've got senators from both sides of the aisle saying Trump went too far. You've got legal analysts and constitutional experts all saying the same thing. And you've got the threat hanging over everything like a dark cloud. If Trump keeps refusing, if he keeps defying Congress, if he keeps pushing boundaries and breaking norms and violating his oath, then Congress has to make a choice. Do they actually try to remove him using the constitutional process that exists in the Constitution? Or do they just back off and let him stay and admit that they have no power? Because here's the thing that makes this so explosive and so unprecedented and so important. Congress isn't just asking Trump to resign because they don't like his policies or his tweets or his personality or his hair. They're asking him to resign because they believe he's violated his oath as President of the United States. They believe he's brought shame to the office, They believe he's fundamentally unfit and dangerous and that he poses a threat to the country. And they're saying, look, we're giving you a way out that doesn't involve a full impeachment trial that will tear the country apart. Just go. Just step down. Make it clean. Save yourself and save the country from a constitutional crisis that could damage institutions for generations. And Trump said no. That refusal is the crazy part. That's the moment that changes everything. That's the moment that takes this from political theater to actual constitutional emergency. Because now Congress can't just back off. They can't just drop it and move on to something else. If they do, they're saying that Congress has no power to check a president. They're saying that a president can do whatever he wants and there's nothing anyone can do about it. They're saying that the Constitution doesn't work. That's not a democracy. That's not how the Constitution is supposed to work. That's not what the founders intended. So now they're stuck. They have to either follow through on the impeachment threat or admit that they were bluffing the whole time. And if they're bluffing, then Congress is finished. They're just theater at that point. They're completely powerless. That's the real stakes here. That's why this story is absolutely crazy and why it's being talked about everywhere. It's not really about Trump wearing the wrong tie or saying something offensive. Well, I mean, it is partly about Trump, but it's also about whether Congress can actually do its job as a check on executive power. It's about whether the Constitution still matters in America. It's about whether we're still a country governed by laws, or whether we're just watching one guy act out his fantasies while everyone else scrambles to keep up and maintain some semblance of order. Trump refusing to step down isn't just defiance. It's a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. It's a moment where we find out if the system can actually work or if it's completely broken and useless. Okay, so let's dig into what's actually happening here and what it means for the future of this whole situation, because there's a lot to unpack here. And I want to walk you through it step by step so you understand exactly what Congress is threatening and exactly why Trump's refusal is such a big deal in the broader context of presidential power. First, let's talk about the options that the Constitution actually gives us as a country for removing a president from office. There are literally only 4 ways this can happen in America. And I mean only 4. Congress can't just vote to kick him out on a whim. The public can't protest him out of office. The media can't shame him into leaving. The courts can't force him to step down. There are only 4 legal mechanisms that exist under the Constitution of the United States. And they are the only ways a president can be removed before the end of their term. Option number 1 is that Trump voluntarily resigns. He just decides, okay, I'm done, I'm exhausted, I'm going to step down. And he walks away peacefully. That would be the cleanest option. That would be the fastest option. That would cause the least amount of damage to the country and its institutions. That's what Congress is asking him to do right now. But Trump said no. So that option is off the table, at least for now. Option number 2 is the 25th Amendment. That's where the vice president and a majority of the cabinet get together and say, hey, we think the president is unfit to do his job, and we're using the constitutional mechanism to remove him from power. But that requires the VP and a majority of the cabinet to agree and vote, which is not going to happen because Trump picks his own cabinet. Trump doesn't put people in his cabinet who are going to turn on him and stab him in the back. Trump surrounds himself with loyalty. So that's not really a viable option either, and everyone knows it. Option number 3 is impeachment and conviction. That's where the House votes to impeach the president on charges, and then the Senate holds a trial and votes on whether to convict. If 2/3 of the Senate votes to convict him, then the president is removed from office permanently. That's the nuclear option. That's the full constitutional process. That's the most serious thing Congress can do. And that's what Congress is threatening right now. They're saying, look, if you don't resign, we're going to do this. We're going to impeach you. We're going to have a trial. We're going to make it all play out publicly. We're going to have witnesses. We're going to have evidence. Everything is going to come out. Option number 4 is that Trump loses the next election and his term ends naturally when the election happens. But Trump's term isn't ending anytime soon. So that's not relevant right now. And it's not part of the conversation. So, when Congress walks up to Trump and says, resign or face impeachment, they're really only talking about two viable options. Step down voluntarily or face the formal impeachment and Senate trial process. And Trump has already picked his option. He's going to fight. He's going to insist he did nothing wrong. He's going to say this is a witch hunt and a coup. And Congress is going to have to decide whether they're serious about impeachment or whether they're just bluffing for political points to satisfy their base. Now, here's where it gets really complicated and really interesting, and where the political reality hits the constitutional theory. Over 120 members of Congress just issued this demand for resignation. That's a lot of people. That's a significant portion of the House. But the House has about 435 members total. So 120 is still less than a third. And for impeachment to actually happen, the House needs a simple majority vote. So they need at least 218 votes. 120 is not enough by itself. They would need about 100 more votes to actually impeach Trump. So even though there's all this public pressure and all these demands flying around, the actual vote count for impeachment is still not guaranteed. Not yet, anyway. That's the gap between political theater and constitutional reality. That's the gap between what people are saying and what they can actually do. Same thing with the Senate and conviction. You need 2/3 of the Senate to convict, which is 67 senators out of 100 total. Right now, even if the House impeaches, there's basically no way you get 67 senators to vote to convict and remove Trump from office. The Republican senators, even if they're frustrated with Trump, and even if they think he went too far, are not going to vote to remove him from office. That's a hard line for most of them. That's a betrayal of their party and their base that most of them are not willing to do because it would destroy their political career. So even if Congress impeaches, the Senate is probably not going to convict. That's a real possibility here. That Congress goes through the whole process, drags everyone through a full impeachment trial for weeks or months, and then the Senate votes to acquit and Trump stays in office anyway. That would be humiliating for Congress. That would prove that they were just posturing the whole time. But here's the thing that keeps Trump and his team up at night. Trump doesn't know for sure that the Senate would acquit him. Nobody knows for sure. Things could change. More senators could get frustrated. Public opinion could shift dramatically. Another scandal could break. That's even worse. The pressure could mount. And that uncertainty is what Trump is actually afraid of, even if he won't admit it. That's why Congress is using the threat of impeachment as leverage. They're saying, look, do you really want to risk a full Senate trial? Do you really want to have testimony and evidence and all this stuff come out publicly? Do you really want to put yourself and your family through that? Do you want all your secrets exposed? Just resign and avoid it. Just walk away. But Trump can't back down. That's not who he is. He spent his whole life never backing down from anything. He spent his whole life fighting and insisting he's right. So, he's going to make Congress go through the whole process, whether they like it or not. And that process is messy and complicated and weird because Congress is split and dysfunctional, and nobody really knows how it's going to end. The political landscape is unstable. The parties are fractured. There are factions within both parties with different agendas and different interests. But Trump is going to fight it anyway. He's going to use every tool he has. He's going to use his social media platforms. He's going to use his supporters. He's going to use his lawyers. He's going to use every technique he knows to defend himself. And here's the crazy part. Trump's pattern is always the same. He's done this before. After the Mueller investigation, after Ukraine, after January 6th, every time someone threatens him or investigates him or tries to remove him, Trump does the exact same thing. He rages. He insists he did nothing wrong. He says it's a witch hunt and a hoax and a coup. He says everybody's jealous of him and the system is rigged against him. And then he digs in and refuses to resign or cooperate. And every single time it makes the whole situation worse. It escalates. It gets more tense. It becomes more dangerous. So now we're in this loop where Congress is escalating with demands and threats, and Trump is refusing to back down or compromise. And we're heading toward a full constitutional confrontation that nobody really wants. But that seems unavoidable at this point. And nobody knows how it ends because we've never really been here before. We've had impeachments in American history, but we've never had a situation where you've got this much public pressure, this much bipartisan demand, this much talk about the president actually being unfit for office and dangerous. This is uncharted territory. This is unprecedented. This is the kind of moment where you look back at history and go, yeah, that's when things started to fall apart. That's when democracy started cracking. That's when it got real and stopped being abstract theory. All right, let's break this down into the actual points that matter for you and what this means going forward for the country and for your understanding of how power works. Point number one is understanding the massive gap between political pressure and constitutional reality. And this is crucial because a lot of people don't understand this distinction. Congress can demand that Trump resign all day long. They can pass resolutions, they can make speeches, they can go on the news and talk about how unfit he is, they can call press conferences, they can issue statements, they can write op-eds, but none of that actually makes him resign. None of that actually removes him from office. None of that has any legal force. The only things that matter in a legal sense are the constitutional mechanisms: impeachment and conviction in the Senate, the 25th Amendment process, voluntary resignation. Those are the only things that work. Those are the only things that are binding. Everything else is just noise and political theater. And right now, Trump has made it clear he's not choosing voluntary resignation. And the 25th Amendment isn't going to happen because his cabinet is loyal to him and he controls them. So the only real option left is impeachment and Senate trial. And that's a heavy lift. That's a difficult thing to accomplish. The House probably has the votes to impeach if they get everyone who's currently demanding resignation on board, and maybe a few more people who haven't publicly committed yet. That would be around 220 to 230 votes maybe, which is just over the 218 needed. So impeachment could happen. It's possible. But then you get to the Senate and you need 67 votes to convict. You probably have maybe 20 to 30 Republican senators who are frustrated enough with Trump to consider voting for conviction. The rest are not going to vote to remove him. They just won't. It's not going to happen. So you could end up in a situation where the House impeaches, the Senate has a trial with all the testimony and evidence and drama, and then the Senate votes 48 to convict and 52 to acquit or something like that. Trump stays in office, he survives, and Congress just wasted everyone's time and attention. That's actually a possibility. And it's kind of horrifying when you think about it deeply, because then Congress has no real power. Then Trump wins. Then the whole system is revealed to be broken because Congress can try to remove the president and fail, and there's nothing they can do about it. The system just doesn't work if the political opposition can't even remove a president when they have significant majorities and bipartisan support. That breaks democracy in a fundamental and perhaps irreparable way. Point number two is that Trump's refusal to step down is completely on brand for him. This is what Trump does. This is who he is. He always fights. He never admits he's wrong. He never backs down. He never takes a deal that involves him losing face or admitting any wrongdoing whatsoever. So when Congress said resign or face impeachment, Trump's response was basically, no, I'm staying right here. Come and get me if you're brave enough. And that's what he's going to do the whole way through this process if it gets that far. If Congress impeaches him, he's going to rage on social media. He's going to say it's a witch hunt and a hoax and persecution. He's going to tell his supporters that Congress is trying to stage a coup. He's going to make the whole process as combative and divisive as possible. He's not going to cooperate. He's not going to show remorse. He's not going to do anything to make this process easier on anybody or faster or less painful. And that's actually part of why this is so dangerous and so frightening to people, because Trump's defiance is infectious. It spreads to his supporters like a virus. It spreads to his party. It spreads to media outlets that support him. And suddenly you've got a situation where half the country thinks Congress is staging a coup, and the other half thinks Congress is finally doing something about a dangerous president. And the country is more divided than ever. And the democratic institutions that are supposed to hold everything together are being torn apart by the conflict. Point number 3 is that this is happening because Trump has apparently crossed some kind of line that even members of his own party think is too far. The research mentions Supreme Court decisions that are destroying his legal shields. It mentions that Trump violated his oath and brought shame to the presidency. It mentions articles of impeachment that are already advancing through committees. So there's clearly something specific that happened that triggered this demand for resignation. We don't know exactly what it is from the research alone, but it's something serious enough that over 120 members of Congress decided they had to do something about it right now. It's something serious enough that 7 senators decided to step out and put their names on this demand. So this isn't just random political theater or a stunt. This is Congress responding to something that members on both sides think is actually dangerous or illegal or unconstitutional or all three. That matters because it means Congress isn't just playing games here. They're serious about this. They're actually considering whether Trump has crossed a line that requires his removal from office. And that's a high bar. That's a serious threshold. That's not something Congress does lightly or often. Point number 4 is that the outcome of this situation is going to define what kind of country we are going forward and what kind of democracy we actually have. Either Congress backs off and admits that they can't actually remove a sitting president, even when they have significant support in bipartisan votes, or Congress follows through on impeachment and either removes Trump or fails to convict him and proves that the system doesn't work. Either way, we're going to learn something really important and fundamental about our democracy. We're going to learn whether Congress has any real power to check a president who goes too far and violates his oath. We're going to learn whether the Constitution's removal mechanisms actually work or whether they're just old paper that doesn't mean anything anymore. And that's a big deal. Because if Congress can't remove Trump, even with this much public pressure and bipartisan support, and when they seem to think he's violated his oath, then Congress can't remove any president for anything. That means the presidency is too powerful. That means we don't have checks and balances anymore. That means we're not a constitutional democracy in any real sense. That means we're living under an elected autocrat. So here's the bottom line for everything we've talked about. Congress gave Trump an ultimatum: resign with dignity or face impeachment in a full Senate trial. Trump said no and refused completely. And now we're heading toward a confrontation that could reshape our entire understanding of how the government is supposed to work and what the Constitution actually means. Congress either follows through on the threat and tries to remove Trump through the formal constitutional process, or they back off and admit that they have no real power to check presidential power. Either way, we're about to find out if the Constitution still works or if we're living in something else entirely. That's where we are right now. That's the stakes. That's why this story is crazy and why it matters so much, and why everyone is paying attention to what happens next. Because the answer to what Congress does in the next few weeks might be the answer to what kind of country we actually are, and whether we're still a constitutional democracy or something else entirely.